If a country within the NATO alliance tries to take over Greenland, would Canada then be ready to contribute with military forces and actually put up military resistance to protect Greenland?
We're clear on where we stand, and we will continue to stand with Denmark and Greenland. Thank you.
Going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
So it looks like Mark Carney of Canada is still running his mouth at Trump. And it's hilarious because I feel like most of the world has already moved on from this, right? Last year, we already saw most of the trade deals get signed. Differences over tariff rates were negotiated and ironed out. And it's old news to most of the world by now. Everybody has moved on. But the only ones still on their island who are fuming about this are, of course, the liberal Canadians who are still screaming, "No kings! Donald Trump was mean to us and we're going to suicide our entire civilization because we want to spite Trump or something," which, by the way, is exactly what is happening at the moment. And it's funny because you would think that if you're the Prime Minister of Canada, you should have better things to do, right? You have domestic issues to solve, but clearly the Liberals don't want to do anything about the gigantic cost of living crisis that they face in their own country. It's very interesting, despite being the supposedly progressive, left-wing, socialist, hippie country. As a matter of fact, the people there are far worse off when it comes to socioeconomics than America, and I think that's a useful lesson there for progressives to take note of. But, you know, let's do nothing about that. Let's not solve immigration. Let's not figure out why our GDP has basically been stagnant for the entire last decade. No, the most important thing is the No Kings protests. But I suppose when you are a failing liberal government, it does kind of lend some credence if you will simply rally the people around the flag of, oh, let's all hate on the American president or something. But you really have to be skeptical as to how long that strategy is going to last. Because at this point, it is basically like dealing with a Democrat governor, right? Mark Carney is almost indistinguishable from Gavin Newsom or one of these random Democrats who's constantly seething about Trump, but at least the Democrats have the excuse that they exist within the American political system. This guy is the leader of a different country, and all he says and does is only about Donald Trump, and I mean that literally, right? When you look at many of Mark Carney's actual political moves, legislation or policies he's tried to enact over the past year, ever since he became the prime minister, almost 99% of them are entirely focused around simply spiting Donald Trump, whether it's basically trying to sell his country out and open relations with China, which is to do what? Give a big F you to Trump, right? Now, apparently, the brand new move we're here to talk about today is Mark Carney's latest announcement that he will be upping the investment into Canada's armed forces, aka their military, which on the surface you might think is a good thing. Hey, Donald Trump wants countries to invest more into NATO, right? You know, he's made that argument for a long time, except Carney basically put this out with the sly implication that this is kind of a rebellion against the United States. Hey, maybe even, you know, not that he's literally going to fight the United States. Everyone knows that's not happening. That's not realistic, but sort of playing into that idea, right? Into that theme that, hey, Canada's strong on its own. We're standing on our own 2 feet. And yet when you simply watch the video that he actually put out, and look at the real numbers of how much he's supposedly investing into revitalizing the Canadian military, it's a complete joke. It's only further reinforcing the idea that a lot of our NATO allies are not serious about their own defense. They're largely delinquent when it comes to actually investing in their own militaries. And by the way, Mark Carney, this guy puts out the single most liberal military propaganda video I think I've ever seen. Like, the implication of this is essentially, oh, Canada may not have aircraft carriers, it may not have technology, it may not have manpower, it may not have the money, but don't worry, we're going to fight the Americans back with our diversity or something. Like, it really is that bad. So in today's video, guys, I want to tell you about this. Again, Canada's new military project to supposedly reinvest into their armed forces, despite the fact that, okay, so sure, they're contributing to NATO, I suppose, not enough as they need to be. But, you know, okay, what is that? What is the point of that, right? Are they going to come to help out in the Middle East? Certainly not. We already know how Carney feels about that. Are they going to help out with the defense of Asia against China? Well, I doubt that as well, because Mark Carney recently this year was in Beijing cozying up to China. So what is the only actual purpose of the Canadian military, right? To try to invade the United States or something? It's a joke. It's a joke. But anyways, let's get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, just to show you that I'm not 100% joking about this, Mark Carney has tried to make the recent implication over the past few weeks that indeed, if America pisses him off, he will try to use the military against America. We repeat, it's not a serious idea whatsoever. But as I said, what has he been doing? Running his mouth, talking a lot of crap, and it's kind of hysterical.
I'd like to know what Canada is doing to protect the integrity of Greenland. And related, China fashions itself a near-Arctic power, and with some claims to Arctic resources. So I wonder if you could answer that question, what we're doing to help protect Greenland's integrity, and how do you feel about China's claims, such as they are, to Arctic resources?
Well, several aspects of that. The first, with respect to Greenland, the future of Greenland is a decision for Greenland and for the Kingdom of Denmark. We are NATO partners with Denmark, and so our full partnership stands. Our obligations on Article 5, Article 2 of NATO stand, and we stand full square behind those.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think we heard what we just heard. Did this guy just threaten to invoke Article 5 against the United States if Greenland ended up being annexed by Trump? I think it's pretty obvious that's exactly what happened here. You know, Mr. Tough Guy, oh yeah, Canada's going to fight the United States or something militarily. I mean, that's obviously a complete joke, okay? It's not a serious idea. I don't even perceive it as a threat from Mark Carney, to be completely honest with you. I just see it as like a drunk guy at a bar just talking some crap because his team lost in a sports game, which is, by the way, true of Mark Carney's Olympic team. But still, nonetheless, right? But it's still, just keep in mind, that's sort of been the overall attitude as of recent months. It's no longer an issue of trade. You know, Mark Carney and the Canadian Liberals seem to have this power fantasy of using their military to fight back and beat evil Donald Trump and beat the United States, which is, of course, not grounded at all in reality, but I guess they share that in common with the Iranian regime or something like that. Now, that said, let's now shift you to the latest announcement, why Mark Carney's been like threatening war with America as of late. And that's because of the fact he just made the announcement today, quote, "We're rebuilding, rearming, and reinvesting in the Canadian Armed Forces to protect Canadians and our allies." Well, who are your allies, Canada, right? Because you basically have stated you don't think America is an ally. So what, you're going to defend Europe, I guess? You're going to defend China even? You know, it seems like you're buddy-buddy with them lately. Nobody knows what allies actually means, but nonetheless, take a look at this military propaganda video they released because it's laughable. It's actually hilarious. Check it out. Yeah, so a lot to unpack there. First of all, why is half your army Chinese? I mean, what's going on here? Where are the Canadians and the Canadian Armed Forces? Although, you know, given the current state of Canada, I guess putting a bunch of Chinese people there is, you know, completely appropriate. And you could argue, well, Canada is basically overwhelmed right now by Chinese immigration. So it sort of does fit that they do want to invite all of these recent new-coming foreigners into their military and what could possibly go wrong there. And by the way, I'm not even saying that as a talking point. Canada is actually doing this. If you heard recently, announced just in February, Canada is now launching a brand new visa to recruit foreigners to come and serve in their military, right? Imagine, you know, you have things like work visas, student visas, whatever. They're trying to launch a military visa As you can see, as of February 2026, Canada has launched a new specialized express entry category to fast-track permanent residence for skilled foreign military personnel. They're trying to recruit people from foreign militaries, right? What could go wrong? I can't possibly see why this would be a bad idea, you know? Specifically targeting roles like medical officers, pilots, and cyber experts to address recruitment shortages. So, you know, by the way, you want to talk about the selling of state secrets? Oh, yeah. Let's invite a bunch of literal foreigners, like foreign military assets, to go do our cybersecurity for us. Yeah, great idea. And folks, why has it been announced? It's, of course, to address recruitment shortages, which is to say, nobody wants to go die for Mark Carney. Nobody is signing up for the Canadian military for very obvious reasons. And so what they're effectively saying to, let's be real, the CCP to a bunch of people in China, right? It's Canada after all. Hey, Chinese people, you want to come live in Canada? That's fine. Just come into our military, steal our state secrets, overrun the entire military, and surely this will strengthen NATO, right? So much strength being portrayed. And by the way, that's why I say it just completely fits. Oh, and the military recruitment ad. Why is half the military Chinese? What's going on here, guys? No, literally. Okay, so you have look. So wait. So I don't want to be mistaken about this. The last like 3 people. So you have this Asian girl, okay? So there's a white Canadian guy. Asian, that guy looks Asian too, right? And there's like 3 freaking Asians in a row. What's going on here? So I repeat, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. They're literally trying to recruit CCP assets to join their military. But yeah, this is going to make Donald Trump look really bad or something. Oh, and by the way, what's going on here? I don't know if this is a Canadian, I guess it's a Ukrainian military uniform, but you know, you can see the Canadian flag literally being fused with the Ukrainian flag. Not sure, folks, if that's a violation of the flag code of Canada or whatever, but I guess that's the message. Hey, Chinese assets, do you want to come and fight for Ukraine or something, right? Gee, I really wonder why the Canadian military is facing such severe recruitment shortages, right? I wonder why normal, capable, willing, otherwise willing, I should say, Canadian young men just feel no pride in joining the armed forces that, you know, basically blocks out half your flag with another flag and says, yeah, we're going to recruit a bunch of Chinese spies to come run our military, and what could possibly go wrong? But folks, it does not stop there. Today, Mark Carney further made the announcement, and I quote, Canada has hit its 2% NATO defense spending target, which in other words means they're now spending 2% of their GDP on military defense. There's an obvious problem with this announcement that you may already know. We'll explain that in a second. But first, take a listen to what Carney had to say.
For the last 10 months, Canada's new government has been working with unprecedented speed and scale. In 10 months, we have invested over $60 billion in our defense and security. That's the largest year-on-year increase in defense investment in generations. And as a result of these efforts, this morning, NATO confirmed that Canada has achieved its 2% defense expenditure target, half a decade ahead of the original schedule. 6 weeks after forming government, we announced ambitious plans to rebuild, rearm, and reinvest in the Canadian Armed Forces. The highest level of defense spending relative to the size of our economy since the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Now, let's point out that the very reason why Mark Carney is bragging about his 2% is that he's merely just assuming ignorance on behalf of the general population. Nobody knows what these abstract numbers really mean, because if you actually followed anything related to NATO over the last decade, you would know that the number is not 2%, it is 5%, right? That is the new quota that was set years ago by the first Trump administration, and which most NATO countries, with the exception of Spain and I guess somewhat Canada, didn't really agree to, but most were on board, right? So that is the current quota, 5%. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2% quota was set back in 2014. That was supposed to be the quota of 2014. It is now 2026. And as people point out, Canada, who's supposed to be at 5% in NATO, right, are now sitting there bragging, guys, we just hit 2%. What a meaningful investment in our defense. And it only took a decade of Liberal Party leadership to get us there. Yeah, What an absolute joke, right? What an absolute joke. So as people point out here, you weren't even spending 2%. You have been living under the protection of the United States while you sneer at us for providing that protection. Disgusting, which is exactly accurate, by the way, exactly accurate. So attack America all you want, but then you also notice Mark Carney casually admits that Trump is right? Canada has been delinquent in its defense ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall. Ever since 1991, and maybe no imminent threat of the Soviet Union, the transatlantic European and North American bloc outside of America basically got delinquent, and they just assumed, oh, America won the Cold War, they're going to take care of us. And then when we, of course, come along and say, no, that's not good behavior, you casually sort of admit we're right behind the scenes while publicly saying, how dare you? Oh, Trump is so mean. Notice how they always say Trump is so mean, but they never say Trump is so wrong, because he is, of course, correct about these issues. But there you have that. 2%, it was an amount agreed upon in 2014, which we never met. There's been some security inflation since then. This was pointed out to the liberals. The ask, yes, is now 5%. Of course, other people are currently mocking the propaganda video and other such statements of toughness being released by the Carney government. This guy says, so you're going to arm your sea kayaks? You have, in Canada here, has 0 aircraft carriers, 0 destroyers, 3 broken diesel submarines, no nuclear apparently, 1 that kind of works maybe, no Navy-owned replenishment ships, 2 semi-broken heavy icebreakers built in 1966 and 1983 to patrol the longest Arctic coastline on Earth. Now, as you see all these numbers, keep in mind, Canada actually, when you think about it, is a very important naval power because they directly border the Arctic. And in the 21st century, this is arguably the most important shipping lane in the world outside of the Strait of Hormuz. And, come 20, 30 years from now, it may be genuinely more important than even the ones in the Middle East. And here's how Canada treats that, right? Legacy CF-18s, which in other words are F-18s that come from America. You're welcome, Mark Carney, right? F-35's not coming for years, if ever. Well, very likely, I wouldn't be surprised if Canada, just to be Trump deranged, they cancel the sale. They say, no, we want to buy fighter jets from China instead or something. We're buying them from Iran. Yeah, ask them how that works. But yeah, very likely they're going to cancel this order. More generals than working tanks. Now, that's a crazy number. How does the Canadian military have more generals than working tanks? I don't know. But this is the utter state of Canadian management for the past 30 or so years. 1/3 of your woke fighters are obese. Yeah. And then 2/3 are just foreigners, I suppose. It's a pathetic state. The head of your military is a woke English king. Your top general cries on TV, and you've completely pissed off your strongest ally. What exactly is the plan here, Mark?
I apologize to every CAF member, veteran who experienced racism, discrimination, and harassment. And I acknowledge we failed you.
Well, we certainly know the plan is not any imminent moves to come help out with the Strait of Hormuz or anything like that, despite the fact that Canada signed on publicly to the agreement, because as Mark Carney said himself, well, basically this, again, another thinly veiled shot at America right here.
One can never categorically rule out participation. We will stand by our allies when it makes sense. There's a distinction between the offensive actions that were taken and are being taken by the United States and Israel, that were taken by them without consultation with Canada, with other allies, and we're not party to those actions. But we will always defend Canadians. We will always stand by and defend our allies when called upon.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that's supposed to mean, but I'm going to take a wild guess that Mark Carney will not be sending any of his broken diesel submarines to the Strait of Hormuz anytime soon. All of that said, though, I would like to point out, as much as we're mocking the woke recruitment videos and this nonsense, and now suddenly you're at 2%, are you freaking kidding me? What were you doing this entire time, right? That at the end of the day, what's hilarious is they're ultimately doing what Trump's been asking them to do. And this is the part I don't think a lot of Canadian liberals ever can figure out, and it's the same thing when, some European leftists get offended or whatever, is that ultimately, do you understand all along Trump was going to NATO with a very valid point? Okay? Yes, these countries should pay more in defense. It's a mutual defense alliance, okay? And by the way, forget America or whatever. isn't it good for your own country just to have a strong military? I mean, for most of human history, it was seen as a good thing if your country has a strong military, right? And so for a long time, you could never get NATO to do it. But now apparently Mark Carney, and even to a degree the Europeans over the whole Greenland thing, right? Suddenly, because America pissed them off, and they're now trying to prove a point against Trump, you notice all of a sudden they're saying, oh, we're putting $60 billion into the military. We're finally upping our investment. Can you believe it? Ha ha ha, Donald Trump, you're so owned by this. But underlying it, I don't know if these people realize that's what Trump was trying to get you to do, right? Now, don't get me wrong. As much as you pretend like you're going to invade the United States, we know that's not happening, okay? We know it's all just jokes and jousting at the end of the day. Everybody does. Canadians know that. Americans know that. Okay, fine. But the actual real consequence is now a country like Canada has a at least slightly better and more invested military than it does before. And that's supposed to hurt Donald Trump somehow. Yeah, explain that to me. And then to all the American liberals who say, he's burning down our alliances. He doesn't know how to conduct diplomacy. No, he actually clearly understood perfectly how to get the Canadians and the Europeans to act, because clearly, 20 years of giving these speeches where you basically massage their shoulders and talk about democracy or something didn't get any of the NATO countries to actually show up and pay. But the moment Trump showed up and basically slapped them in the face, almost antagonized them to a degree, right? He says Canada's weak. Europe is weak. You're grifting off the United States. You're delinquent. You are, your militaries are a joke. We don't need you, blah, blah, blah. Notice how almost in the reverse psychology, because you get angry about that, now Europe, now Canada, all these countries are in a bid essentially to prove America wrong, to prove they can actually do their own defense. And in the process, guess what they're doing? Exactly what Trump is asking for, right? Investing more in their own defense, investing more in their military. Even people like the NATO General Secretary go on TV now to admit Trump was right. Trump was a genius when it came to NATO. Yeah, I know. Now, that said, is NATO exactly still to this day being all that useful? I mean, not exactly. And clearly, there's a lot of pressure that needs to be put on these countries. But look, I don't know if the NATO alliance is going to survive the 21st century. It's just the truth. I think there's a lot of issues where the strategic interests of America and Europe are starting to diverge from one another. For example, Europe sees Russia as their top threat and is relatively fine with China. America, on the other hand, sees China as the top threat. And, you had even leaders like Macron basically go out and say, we wouldn't defend Taiwan against an invasion. We wouldn't help out NATO there. You can see what's going on in Iran right now. Europe doesn't believe Iran is their battle, etc. So these, geopolitical alliances are based on interest at the end of the day. We can pretend they're about democracy or shared values. No, it all comes down to self-interest. And so if the self-interest of America and Europe no longer align, that might be a trend of our time, a macro trend that's just very hard to beat. But I will say, if anyone is going to salvage the alliance of NATO, of the transatlantic partnership, it actually is Donald Trump, believe it or not, right? People think he's tearing it down. No, he's not tearing it down. He's actually trying to address the fundamental core underlying problems why it was crumbling to begin with. Now, just because he brought those issues to light or he offended people by telling the truth, okay? I don't know how to tell you this. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes the truth hurts and we need to have an honest conversation. But this is what liberals don't understand. They're like, oh, well, NATO's just going to survive because it's going to survive. What makes you say that at all? Like, seriously, liberals, what makes you say that? The Europeans aren't spending on defense. They don't view their strategic interests to be the same as ours. What's going to bring it all together, right? Like, something needs to be whipped here into shape if, like, the partnership is to survive, which I would overall say it probably, I don't know about NATO specifically, but I think it's a good thing in the 21st century and beyond if the transatlantic partnership as a whole generally remains stable, right? Because I think that, if America and Europe were to go their separate ways, while, we might not need each other, it would be better to have each other. It's good that America can project power across Europe and that part of the world. I think there's sort of, yes, a shared bond of our civilizations where we want to see ourselves together and all that, definitely. But at the end of the day, right, someone has to make it real. Someone has to come in and actually make the alliance not just exist on paper or exist because of shared values, but exist because of practice. And that's exactly what we're doing here, right? And it's just hilarious how even the most Trump deranged country in all of NATO accidentally, casually, maybe unknowingly is admitting that Trump is right about that and at least doing some very surface level things to strengthen the alliance. It's pretty hilarious. So anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you were new. And until next time, God bless and peace.